Now, US imperialism is in an irreversible downward spiral. But if we're going to discuss the world today, we really do have to start with Palestine. There's no getting around it. The rage and the frustration of the US ruling class today is palatable. They've shipped the most incredible array of horrific weapons, advisors, limitless funds to West Asia, to the Zionists, also to Egypt, to Jordan, to keep them in line. They've used every tactic of terror, including torching tent encampments and targeting children. They have no idea where the drones from Ansarallah in Yemen are coming from, so they're just bombing civilian centers to terrorize the population. But really, all this proves that declining imperialism has a big problem, because international solidarity is catching on here among young workers, students. It's at a whole different level. And this is so threatening to the ruling class that they're willing to expel thousands of international students, cut off and bankrupt major universities, literally destroy research projects, make unprecedented mass arrests. And actually, the imperialists in Europe and in Britain are doing the same thing. It's so threatening to them. They're willing to demonize also millions of migrants, expel even those they brought to the US, who they thought would be their agents. They're desperate to use all the old baked into the system forms of racism to try to get the working class divided and blaming each other and turning against migrants. The example of revolutionary Gaza, totally surrounded, an open-air prison that somehow found a brilliant way to resist and to make demands, it's changed the consciousness of what's possible. Gaza, faced with another mass expulsion after the mass expulsion of 1948, 1967, after so many attacks and invasions and bombings, they dug tunnels, they repurposed weapons, they crafted drones, and most important, they built a collective machine of the whole population. This deep resistance is rooted in the population as a whole, and it's terrifying. It's a danger to the whole capitalist class internationally. And Palestine has really inspired a powerful movement here in the center of imperialism, and that is for them the danger. First, the corporate media tried silence. They barely covered the mass demonstrations, the hundreds of student encampments. They excluded the very mention of Palestine from all the Democrat and Republican Party debates or any mention of it in Congress. It didn't stop the movement here as the resistance in Gaza continued. That's a big problem for them. They shut down in mass social media posts on X, on YouTube, on Instagram. They targeted journalists in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Lebanon, assassinations, nonstop, really. They used every form of surveillance and to search out and to assassinate the brilliant leaders, Nasrallah, Yahya Sinwar. So can the ruling class here demonize this movement? That's what they're trying to do. And we need to be aware of how much attention they're putting into it. Can they, by coordinating every police agency along with the Zionist thugs to repress it and dox en masse? Can they line up banks and credit cards to cut off every form of self-funding and tax exemption? They're digging into everything. Can they divide the movement by pitting one debate against others? Can they frustrate it? Can they narrow it? Can they turn it inward? Can they chop off the leadership? That's what's being attempted. And this is our challenge from Workers' World Party as a working class party here in the center of imperialism. And it's the reason we exist. It's to always side with and defend our class when it's under attack by imperialism. It's an obligation, and we take it seriously. Otherwise, the working class here is pulled into chauvinism, reaction, and war. So how do we be part of the workers' movement here and yet refuse to be cut off and challenge their compromises? How do we operate even the union movement, even May Day coming up? The union leadership is totally aligned with the imperialist parties on this. Some topics, like solidarity with our class worldwide, are just off limits. And they'll raise pensions and call for health care and better pay and working conditions. That's important. But not a word of defense for migrant workers being rounded up. There's silence on the unrelenting attacks on trans siblings. A majority of the population today supports the policies aimed at protecting trans people from discrimination in jobs and housing and public facilities. You wouldn't know that from the silence. So, and Workers' World held these positions when almost no one else did. Why? Because this is our class, and this is humanity in all of its diversity. So poll after poll shows that the average worker here overwhelmingly is sympathetic with the Palestinian struggle. Even if they don't understand every world struggle. That's kind of amazing. And they have turned against Israel in an irreversible way. It is unprecedented. The US ruling class knows that they need the fear and silence and acquiescence of the working class within the US. And they need it because they're failing everywhere else in the world. For 75 years, trillions pumped into the US military budget as a way to pump up a failing economy, the largest military machine in the world, and they couldn't defeat the poorest country in the world, Afghanistan. That must haunt them. No, they're planning a new war against China. You would think reality would step in at some moment. Now, the stock market fell again today, and it has almost every day in April. None of us, I'm sure, have investments in the stock market, and yet we think we don't. What are the pension funds? And what are so many other, every city fund, universities, they're all, it's used by the hedge to bail themselves out. So on April 2nd, Trump declared Liberation Day, and he said he was imposing tariffs on 150 countries. The developing countries hit the hardest, 45% tariffs for Vietnam and Cambodia, at least 10% for everyone else. The stock market had a meltdown. Now, I just want to say a word on tariffs. This isn't the whole discussion, but tariffs are not paid by the country that's targeted. They're paid by US corporations that ordered the goods. They're paid by Walmarts and Costco and Target and Apple or their shipper. And then it's paid to the US government. It's just passed on to US workers. It really is true that tariffs and tax are the same thing. Slightly different wording. So these tariffs caused such a meltdown that Trump had to pull back. The billionaires told him, hey, this is really bad for our business. They shelved the tariffs on the rest of the world for 90 days. Now that creates greater insecurity because nobody knows what the price of anything is going to be in 90 days. It's not helping the stock market much. But they shelved it in order to focus on China. Now, despite Trump's hype, tariffs won't reindustrialize the US economy in a way that brings back any significant number of manufacturing jobs. They won't reverse the US economy's long decline and the loss of US competitiveness in global markets. Creating a wall of protection to stop the flow of cheap goods into the US won't build new factories here. That's magical thinking. Moving production overseas for the past 4 decades, US corporations ruthlessly deindustrialized the US economy under the rallying cry of free trade. Their goal was to maximize profits by paying lower wages to overseas workers, and millions of workers lost their jobs, homes, futures, pensions as a result, while overseas workers were super exploited. What was called reindustrialization for 40 years was really deindustrialization here in the United States. Deindustrialization meant the loss of heavy industry, auto, steel, shipbuilding, railroads, ports. It also meant the closing of factories that produced basic appliances, washing machines, air conditioners, every imaginable industry, from canneries, food processing, to the garment industry, moved their production to low-wage countries. This building we're in, this room that we're in, was once part of the garment industry. It was all garment workers in this building, in this whole neighborhood. 95% of the garments worn in the US just a few decades ago were made in the US. That industry doesn't even exist anymore. And the unions that represented them have no longer exist. The whole manufacturing base in the US, more than 70,000 industries were permanently closed. Now, China responded sharply to the US tariffs. They were 25%. Then it was announced they were 75%. Then it was 100%. And they said, this is no way to talk to us. The days of unequal treaties are long past. It was quite a sharp response. We will not be threatened. We are the world's largest producer of goods. We have a world market. We will match you tariff for tariff. So the trade war is on. US tariffs are now up to 245% on a whole number of products from China. Now, Apple and Nvidia rushed to meet with Trump to pull back about computers, iPhones, laptops. They said, oh my God, our market, our market. So they pulled back. The next day, they ordered Nvidia to sell no more chips to China for DeepSeek. And that's a $5 billion hit for Nvidia. That's quite a loss. They had specially modified chips that were lower in power.
Who ordered?
Trump, the Trump administration. In response, China canceled purchasing more Boeing parts or planes. The stock went down. China responded by restricting rare earth minerals and rare earth magnets. Now that's a big problem here in the US because China makes 90% of these essential magnets, and the whole processing, we could go into that, about the rare earth minerals, but US tech can't function without them. So I want to raise all this, don't have a lot of time, and we've got to have a full discussion. But the US as a capitalist country really can't and won't reindustrialize because it's a fabulously expensive process. It involves years of investment of the capitalists' own money. And the capitalists individually, collectively as a class, and as the decision makers in this country are driven to seek the highest return, the lowest possible wages, the highest rate of profit. That is what drives them. There's in US corporate law and policy, there's what they call shareholder primacy. It means that corporate boards have the duty to maximize shareholder value, to boost the price of stocks and pay maximum dividends to shareholders. And it implicitly means corporations have no binding obligation to pursue the good of their workers or even the good of the society. So any CEO knows that they're only going to survive by maximizing profit and guaranteeing hefty returns every quarter. It's kind of relentless. So costly investments, long-term plans, that violates their responsibility to their corporate owners, to their shareholders. And any attempt to reindustrialize means a massive investment in infrastructure, in education. That's what's needed for the economy. Takes decades of investment. Their interests are in lowering wages, cutting social benefits, cutting infrastructure investments, cutting education. That's the short-term billionaire strategy because it's in their interests. Now, why can China plan and the US can't? All the most essential and profitable industries in China are owned by the Chinese people. Banking, raw material, electronics, transportation, steel, oil. rare earth minerals. All these profits can and will be reinvested into the society as a whole. It drives the whole economy, drives the country. And it's carried out by a communist party that has 90 million members. That in itself is quite an accomplishment. The private ownership of the means of production, the expropriation of all socially produced wealth by a handful of billionaires means fabulous wealth for those few in the short term. However, it's an actual impediment to the ability to modernize industry in today's global supply chain. And US imperialism is incapable of modernizing into today's global economy because it's totally chained to this outmoded form of production, of ownership. So they can threaten to destroy their opponents, impose all kinds of demands, make big threats. But a military, such as the US military machine, that's not backed up by industrial capacity, becomes, thinking of Mao's famous quote, a paper tiger growling, but without substance. So in closing, I want to go say that the interests of workers and oppressed people here in the US is bound up with the development of the people of the whole world. And it's only through increased cooperation, solidarity, planning, that we develop the ability to solve the enormous global problems. The ability to rationally plan and invest socially created wealth into rapidly improving technology. This is a challenge for this age. And it's Trump's short-sighted, beyond ignorant, really, but he is a capitalist in every sense. That means they cannot see long-term. They can only see the profits of the next quarter. And when we challenge them, we are really standing with the whole world.